Have you ever wondered what happens when Halloween takes a turn for the terrifying? Imagine a group of friends eager for a night of trick-or-treating, only to stumble upon a mysterious, abandoned house that seems to hold dark secrets. What could possibly be lurking within its shadowy walls? As harmless pranks spiral into something far more sinister, they find themselves pursued by an unseen terror. Join us as we explore these chilling, true Halloween stories where laughter gives way to fear. Will they escape the encroaching darkness, or will this Halloween be their last? But before we delve into tonight's terrifying tales, a huge shout out to all of you. Your support fuels this channel and keeps the nightmares coming. If our eerie stories captivate you, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a chilling episode. And if you want to help us grow and keep the fear alive, share our videos, drop a comment, or explore our support options on Patreon or Ko-fi. Every bit of support helps us bring you the best spine-tingling content. Thank you for joining us on this dark journey. Now let's embrace the shadows together. It all began on a dreary Friday night in mid-October, right around Halloween. I was at a housewarming party, themed for the occasion, surrounded by friends and new faces. I hadn't dressed up, I came straight from work and was already feeling pretty worn out. To perk myself up, I took an Adderall before stopping at a gas station for some White Claw. The party had a decent turnout, about 25 to 30 people. While the socializing and drinks kept me awake, I found myself longing for my bed. Working in a hospital, my sleep schedule was always chaotic, and I was exhausted. Eventually, I decided it was time to make my exit. I spotted an opportunity for an Irish goodbye through the backyard. I simply didn't have the energy to say goodbye to everyone. I know it wasn't wise to drive after drinking, and I definitely don't recommend it. Always call an Uber. I dashed through the rain to my Subaru and hopped in, cranking the engine and starting to drive without any music playing. I just wanted to focus on the soothing sound of the rain hitting the windshield. As I navigated a quiet residential road, I spotted a girl walking in the rain. She had no umbrella or jacket, just standing there, drenched. As I approached, she stopped and looked directly at my car. I hesitated, debating whether to keep driving or pull over. My compassionate side won out, and I stopped to offer her a ride. When I rolled down the window and asked if she needed a lift, she didn't say a word. Instead, she slipped into the back seat. I inquired where she was headed, and she replied she just needed to go down the road a bit. So, I drove in that direction. As I stopped at the second stop sign, I asked her why she was out in the rain. She said she was in a hurry and didn't want to call a cab. I chuckled, making a comment about the expense of cabs and Ubers. I introduced myself as Jake and she told me her name was Ali. After that, the conversation faded into silence. I continued down the street until I noticed a dead-end sign ahead. I came to a stop and asked if her destination was past the sign. She didn't respond, and as I glanced in the rearview mirror, my heart dropped. She was gone. I hit the brakes and turned around, panic setting in. She wasn't in the back seat. I pulled over, got out, and rushed to check the back. It was completely empty, no sign of her anywhere. I scanned the dimly lit road, only illuminated by the occasional streetlight. There was absolutely no way she could have exited the car without me hearing the door. Doubt began to creep in and I felt around the seat and floor. It was completely dry. She should have been wet from the rain. Standing there in the rain, I felt a mix of confusion and fear. I looked around once more and then noticed a fence right next to my car. Beyond it lay a cemetery. Suddenly, Her earlier response hit me. When I'd asked where she was going, she had simply said, "Down to the end of this road." I glanced back at the cemetery, which indeed marked the end of the road. A chill ran down my spine as I hurried back to my car, made a quick 3-point turn, and raced home. I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't been drunk enough to hallucinate, yet I was left questioning everything that had just happened. It was 2018 and I was in middle school, buzzing with excitement for Halloween. My friends and I were especially thrilled because we knew this would likely be our last year trick-or-treating. Our school had a half day, which felt like a gift, giving us extra time to prepare. But we didn't gather until around 5 p.m, just as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. The fading light heightened our eagerness to collect as much candy as we could. There were 3 of us, all dressed in simple black clothing and random masks we'd scrounged together a couple of days before. It was a low-effort costume, but it did the trick after all. We were there for the candy. We kicked off our night at my house, excitedly discussing our strategy as we filled our bags with empty wrappers and hopes of full-sized treats. Our goal was to hit the other side of the neighborhood, where the big, fancy houses were located, those rich neighborhoods where we hoped to score full-sized candy bars instead of the usual miniatures. As we set off, the streets were alive with laughter and chatter from other kids. We stopped at most of the houses along the way, and it took us nearly 2 hours to reach the posh section. By the time we arrived, most of the other kids had called it a night, leaving the sidewalks mostly deserted. Though it was late, just past 9 p.m, there were still a few lights on, so we figured we'd still manage to snag some treats. However, as we approached each grand house, we quickly realized we had underestimated the distance between them. It took about 5 minutes to walk from one door to the next, so we ended up jogging to keep our candy haul going. Each house was like a mini workout, and our energy began to wane. By the time we reached the last few houses, the lights were turning off one by one, and no one was answering the doors. Feeling defeated, we decided it was time to head back to my place for some movies and to enjoy our candy stash. Just as we began walking down the street, we noticed a figure approaching us. It was too dark to make out his face, but he was clearly an adult wearing a hood that obscured his features. The 3 of us exchanged uneasy glances. It felt odd to see someone like him wandering around on Halloween night when the streets were typically filled with laughter and excitement. We instinctively moved to the opposite side of the street as he passed, but it was clear he was watching us, trying to hide his gaze. I felt a knot of unease tighten in my stomach. His behavior felt unsettling, and though we wanted to hurry home, our exhaustion from the evening's activities made us reluctant to run. After a few minutes, we felt we had put enough distance between us and him. Just when I was starting to relax, my friend in front abruptly stopped, causing me to bump into him. I was about to jokingly scold him when I looked up and froze. There, standing between the trees by one of the houses, was the same hooded man, lurking just beyond the reach of the streetlights. He seemed to be waiting for us, and we could barely make out his figure against the dark backdrop of the night. Panic surged through us, and we whispered hurriedly among ourselves, trying to figure out what to do. But there wasn't much to decide. There was only one path forward, and that was directly toward him. As we got closer, he suddenly stepped out of the shadows and started walking toward us. Fear kicked in, and we bolted, sprinting toward the trees on the other side of the road. Adrenaline pumped through our veins as we raced into the woods, hoping it would lead us back to safety. The deeper we ran, the darker and more disorienting it became. Branches scratched at our arms and legs, and I could barely see where I was going. After what felt like an eternity, we realized we had either lost him or he had given up the chase. We paused to catch our breath, leaning against a tree, our hearts racing. Just as we were starting to calm down, we heard footsteps crunching through the leaves nearby. My stomach dropped, and we held our breath, straining to listen as the sounds moved closer. They eventually faded into the distance, but we dared not move just yet. Once we felt certain it was safe, we hurried out of the woods, emerging onto a street we recognized. Relief washed over us as we made our way back to my house. The closer we got, the more I felt the tension ease, but the fear from earlier still clung to me. None of us had the nerve to call the police, but we didn't see any other trick-or-treaters on our way back, which made us hope they had all made it home safely. We couldn't shake the unsettling feeling of what had just happened. The fact that the man had chased us into the woods and continued to search for us sent chills down my spine. Once we got back to my house, we gathered in the living room, the comfort of familiar surroundings helping to ease our anxiety. We turned on a movie, but none of us were really paying attention. Instead, we kept stealing glances at the window, half expecting to see that hooded figure lurking outside. That night marked the end of our trick-or-treating adventures. We stopped going out for Halloween after that, a tradition we had cherished. Even now, years later, I still get chills thinking about that terrifying encounter. What was that man's intention? Why was he out there? The questions lingered, and the memory of that night remains etched in my mind, a haunting reminder of how quickly a fun evening can turn into something far more sinister. It was Halloween night 2020, and my friends and I were craving a thrilling adventure. We had heard about the old Willow Creek Cemetery, a place rumored to be haunted by the spirits of its past residents. Chilling tales of ghost sightings and eerie sounds had circulated in our small town for years, and we felt it was the perfect time to put those stories to the test. Dressed in a mix of costumes, one of us was a witch, another a vampire, and I went as a ghost, draped in a white sheet with smeared face paint. We gathered flashlights, snacks, and our courage. The air was crisp, and as the sun dipped below the horizon, the moon cast an unsettling glow over the landscape. Upon arrival, the cemetery's wrought iron gates creaked ominously as we pushed them open. The gravel path crunched underfoot, leading us into a world that felt frozen in time. Ancient headstones loomed like sentinels, their inscriptions worn and faded. The trees surrounding the cemetery swayed gently, casting long, dancing shadows that beckoned us deeper into the graves. "Okay, let's split up and meet back here in 30 minutes, suggested Mark, ever the instigator. My stomach twisted at the thought, but everyone else nodded eagerly. I reluctantly took a flashlight and wandered toward the back of the cemetery, feeling a mix of excitement and dread. As I walked among the graves, a peculiar stillness enveloped me. My heart raced with each step, an unseen weight pressing down. Suddenly I stumbled upon an ornate tomb adorned with intricate carvings, unlike any I had seen before. At its base, partially hidden in the overgrown grass, was a small, weathered doll. Its glassy eyes seemed to gleam in the moonlight, and I couldn't resist picking it up. The moment I touched the doll, a sudden chill swept over me. I brushed it off as a draft and turned to head back, but something stopped me. A whisper, barely audible, floated through the air. "Help me," it seemed to say. I shook my head, convinced it was just my imagination running wild. Hurrying back toward the meeting point, I found my friends already gathered, looking uneasy. "Did you hear that?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling. I nodded and shared my experience with the doll and the whisper. They exchanged nervous glances and we all agreed it was time to leave. As we turned to exit, we noticed a figure standing at the edge of the cemetery. It was a tall, shadowy figure in a dark hood, just beyond the reach of our flashlights. The air thickened around us and my heart raced with panic. "Let's go," I urged. and we started walking briskly, trying not to attract attention. The figure seemed to move as we did, remaining just out of sight, blending into the darkness. We quickened our pace, glancing back every few seconds, but it was still there, watching us. The whisper returned, echoing in my mind. "Help me!" As we approached the exit, the figure suddenly stepped into the light. My stomach dropped as I recognized the face beneath the hood, an older man with hollow cheeks and a haunting gaze. He pointed toward the cemetery, his mouth moving, but no sound came out. It was like he was pleading with us to stay. Terrified, we dashed out of the gates and into the street, sprinting toward the nearest house, our breaths ragged and hearts racing. I glanced back, and the cemetery was now silent, the figure gone as if it had never existed. Huddled together, we tried to process what had just happened. "Did that really just happen?" I gasped. My friends echoed similar sentiments, sharing their own experiences of the night, piecing together the terror we had faced. Once we calmed down, we decided to head home. As I lay in bed that night, the image of the doll and the shadowy figure haunted my thoughts. I tried to rationalize it, thinking it was just a trick of the light or perhaps my imagination running wild. The next day, while scrolling through social media, I stumbled upon a post about the cemetery. It included an article detailing the history of Willow Creek Cemetery, mentioning a tragic tale of a young girl who had gone missing years ago. She was last seen near the very tomb where I found the doll. The story chilled me to the bone, and I felt a knot form in my stomach. For weeks, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me home that night. I locked the doll away in a box, but even so, the whispers seemed to linger in the corners of my mind. As Halloween approached the following year, the fear intensified. My friends and I decided to revisit the cemetery, hoping to confront our fears. Armed with flashlights and a sense of determination, we entered once more. The atmosphere felt thicker this time, almost suffocating. As we ventured deeper, we came across a scarecrow propped against a tree, a strange sight for a cemetery. It was tattered and worn, with a menacing grin painted on its face. I felt an odd connection to it, as if it was somehow aware of our presence. "Let's get out of here," I urged, but my friends insisted we investigate further. As we neared the scarecrow, the whispers grew louder, wrapping around us like a chilling embrace. "Help me," they echoed, sounding desperate. Suddenly, the scarecrow's head jerked to the side and its painted eyes locked onto mine. I stumbled back, a jolt of fear coursing through me. In that moment, I realized it wasn't just a decoration. It felt alive, an eerie sentinel watching over the graves. Panicking, we turned to leave, but the path seemed to stretch endlessly before us. The whispers crescendoed, drowning out my thoughts. "Help me!" They were coming from everywhere, filling the air, clawing at my sanity. We finally broke free, racing out of the cemetery, the fear propelling us forward. When we reached safety, we collapsed against a fence, breathless and terrified. That night, the images of the doll, the shadowy figure, and the scarecrow haunted my dreams. Halloween has never felt the same since. Each year, as the date approached, I felt a wave of anxiety wash over me, the chilling memory of that night in Willow Creek forever etched in my mind. If you've encountered a terrifying event, or have a spine-chilling horror story to share, we at Eerie Shadows want to hear from you. Share your experiences with us and let's uncover the mysteries lurking in the eerie shadows together. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel for more eerie tales and spine-chilling stories like this one.